Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network, diving into our second topic of the show, looking more at Chris Jones' record deal with the Kansas City Chiefs. This really happened before the start of the tampering period yesterday, before Monday. The Chiefs got this deal done, or they were said to have this deal basically wrapped up before these last few days, over the weekend really, and the deal wasn't signed until I think just yesterday or maybe even Sunday. But regardless of that, Chris Jones is staying even longer with the Kansas City Chiefs. They were able to get him back on a 5-year deal worth 95, or with 5-year deal, 95 million. 95 million being guaranteed, and all the money basically it's in the first 3 years, with 95 of that being guaranteed, and then the other 2 years, I'm sure there's stipulations or clauses in there where, in 3 years he's going to be 32 years old. So I'm sure there's some clauses or stuff like that, stipulations where they could opt out of it, where it won't cost them a lot of money. But it is officially a 5-year deal, and once that contract was signed, Jones became the highest paid player ever based on annual salary for a defensive tackle or a defensive line player, surpassing Nick Bosa, who was at $34 million per year, Aaron Donald at $31.5 million per year, and more on the numbers. The $95 million guaranteed is the fourth most money guaranteed money for a defensive player. Nick Bosa has $119 million. The most guaranteed money, then it's Joey Bosa at $102 million guaranteed, then Myles Garrett, and then Chris Jones follows them up at $95 million guaranteed. So a lot of money for Chris Jones, but he is one of the players that definitely deserves it, just based on this past year and going back to last season as well. He played on a 1-year deal, and he still produced 10.5 sacks, which is a decent amount for a defensive tackle. With all the double teams that he faces, especially in the middle of the D-line, I always think, they just get almost double teamed regardless, because you have the center and at least one of the guards at least pushing off for you or just helping out, shadowing you a little bit. So they're always facing that double team, and Chris Jones to produce double-digit sacks in a year where he had to on a 1-year deal. And I take that back. When I say he had to, I don't mean that, because he was already very good with the Kansas City Chiefs, so I don't think he was proving anything, but not proving anything, but just reassuring everybody that this is the kind of production you're going to get. 10.5 doesn't seem like a lot really for the kind of player that Chris Jones is, but 10.5 is a lot for another defensive tackle of a different caliber than Chris Jones to produce that kind of number. Any other defensive tackle would have that season, and you would have everybody saying, oh, like they had a great year, a record year. But for Chris Jones, I don't think that's a record kind of year. I think that's kind of what you expect from him. And the Chiefs seem to agree, gave him this big contract for him. And a big topic of discussion with the Chiefs and Chris Jones and just free agency was how they were going to handle this. And another potential free agent in L'Jarius Sneed. It begs the question now, with Chris Jones getting all this money, does this mean the end for L'Jarius Sneed? I think there's still a glimpse of hope for the Kansas City Chiefs to maybe work out something with L'Jarius Sneed. Maybe you work out a short-term deal, or just promise him and convince him that if he plays on the franchise tag next year, you'll guarantee to get something done. Maybe he accepts that, maybe he doesn't, but that's one way, because a lot of reports just say, they can't work out a long-term deal. Both sides have agreed to trade L'Jarius Sneed for his benefit. The Kansas City Chiefs don't want to do him wrong. So to do right by him, they'll trade him, try to find a trade partner. And, I don't think the Kansas City Chiefs have a lot of money left over to not only sign L'Jarius Sneed to probably the kind of money that he has. He probably wants to be at least a top 5 paid corner just based on annual salary. That would be my guess on just the kind of season that he's had, the kind of season that he's been having, the pivotal roles that he's played for the Chiefs, and not just the playoffs, but the whole season. It all makes sense for him to want that money. I agree that he should get that money, and because the Chiefs just signed Chris Jones, I don't think it could get done. That's just my opinion. I'm sure they're in constant communication with him, and it's only his second day of free agency, so this could carry on for a little bit, because he is franchise tag, so they don't have to trade him. They told him that he would trade him, but they don't really have to if the value's not there. So that could always happen. He could just stay and not be happy about it, but that's, they're not guaranteed to trade him, is what I'm trying to say. And on top of it, this was really the only sort of business that the Kansas City Chiefs had to do. And I think if you had to choose between L'Jarius Sneed and Chris Jones, I'm sure they would have and they did want to re-sign Chris Jones back. They did so now, and they're able to sacrifice L'Jarius Sneed if they have to, because they have Trent McDuffie, who is prospering into this very good lockdown corner, very young corner, and they've drafted corners in the last 2 to 3 drafts already in the past, sort of, playing along or thinking that this could be a scenario where they could lose L'Jarius Sneed, and now they're at this point, but they already have the supplements and backup corners if they do need to throw one of them in, if they can't find another one through the draft or free agency to replace L'Jarius Sneed. So the way that the Kansas City Chiefs have been doing business, for general manager Brett Veach to do this sort of business, as well as Andy Reid and playing a role in it, I think it's very applaudable and very good by this team, this front office, and it just sets the standard, really, overall, thinking big picture with this team. You wonder why they're always in the playoffs, or why there's never really a drop-off like there should have been this year, a lot of people would say, with the lack of wide receiver talent that they had on their team. This is the kind of stuff that prevents all of that breakdown from happening. You have a great general manager, great front office, great owner to get these deals done before free agency, because you really never know what's going to happen once your players talk with other teams, what kind of money they'll be thrown at them. Because honestly, if you say you're going to stay with this team, like you're really planning on re-signing with this team no matter what, all it takes is for one team to offer you a crazy deal like they did with Chris Jones, a 5-year, 4-year, $100 million, $90 million sort of deal. And your mind changes pretty quickly after that, in all honesty. So the Chiefs getting their business done before the tampering period starts, before the official start of the new league year, it's just good business by them, and it shows why they still remain at the top. And now if you want to look a little bit forward now, with Jones returning, and with them getting everything done, or just actually one last note on Chris Jones. If anybody still had any doubts on Chris Jones, he's still only 29, and a stat that I found very, very supportive in his case was that the Kansas City Chiefs allowed 4.3 yards per play when Chris Jones was on the field. That ranked first in the NFL, and when he wasn't on the field, they allowed 5.5 yards per play, and that ranked 23 in the NFL. So another thing to just bolster the kind of value Chris Jones brings to this team. One of the eldersmen now on the team, so just from that standpoint as well, you want to have that voice in there. You want to keep that trio together, Chris Jones, Travis Kelce, Patrick Mahomes, the 3 bona fide leaders now, solidified leaders on that team. That means a lot, especially with this team also being young. Other than those 3 guys, a lot of them are in their mid-20s, 27s-ish. I don't think much older than that. So you need not only possibly the greatest quarterback of all time leading your team, he's never going anywhere, but Travis Kelce as well, saying he'll stick around for another year. Chris Jones now guaranteed to stick around. That plays a big part in playoff experience, getting there, being successful in there, and now they're able to keep them around for a lot longer. And that all that three-peat talk, all the talk about another Super Bowl possibly on the way, they're able to secure Chris Jones. Not only does that help that, but honestly, why would you stop there? I'm thinking very long term, but it's what have they done to kind of make you think that anybody could stop them in any way? Maybe other teams getting better, that's a good argument, but other than that, they never do anything where you look at it and you're like, oh, how could you not re-sign him? Why did he not get a contract? Or why are you choosing him over this other player? They never do something like that. They get their business done and then they can move on to other things, getting better. And I say getting better, that brings me to my next question on this topic. How or where else could they really improve if you really think about it. Their D-line is still very good. Chris Jones obviously there, George Karlaftis on the edge as well. They have very good linebackers in Nick Bolton and Will Gay, and they re-signed Drew Tranquil as well at the start of free agency right before the tampering period. So he's coming back, and then in their secondary, like I mentioned, they still have Edwards and Trent McDuffie still being good enough where if you lose L'Jarius Sneed, it's not a huge drop-off. You still have other talented players. And then you go to the offensive side. Pacheco's still there. Travis Kelce's still there. You have Rashee Rice now, who's emerging into your number one receiver. And that's the other position where you could look to improve. Wide receiver or corner are really the only ones you want to look at. Because offensive line, I'm pretty sure most of them are all coming back anyway. They lost Allegretti, but I know they have another one because I'm almost certain that he came in to replace the starter because the starter got hurt in the conference game. So losing Allegretti, yeah, it's a bummer, but you could find another offensive guard, backup to kind of fill up that role. And going more over to the receivers and cornerbacks, there's a lot of options, especially in this draft class, which I keep saying is one of the deepest ones in all the positions all around. You could, late first round, draft a defensive back. Depending on who falls, that's just based on team needs. There's a lot of good ones. Terrion Arnold, Quinion Mitchell is getting his name out there. I'm blanking now. Nate Wiggins is another one. Very fast, eye-popping 40-yard dash. He'll raise his stock, but those three guys are the main guys, I think, in my opinion, that would go. Then you have other ones that could fall later in the draft, so you don't have to take them late first if you don't want to. I talked about it yesterday. If you want to go late first, because you don't have a long list of positions to improve on, why not take a stab at wide receiver? I said it. Xavier Worthy makes the most sense, and I'm not going to be surprised. I'm going to come on here, I know I am, after the draft and say that Xavier Worthy is on the Kansas City Chiefs, and it could be potentially the steal of the draft because of his speed. He's a great route runner if you watch any of the games at Texas, and if he was to end up on the Kansas City Chiefs, pair him up with Rashee Rice and all the speed that they already have on that team, it's going to make this offense as close to complete or as close as they had once upon a time back when they had Tyreek Hill. Of course, Xavier Worthy is nowhere near that level yet, but no one knows how good he'll be in this offense. He could fit perfectly and have a great rookie year, or he could struggle. That's always an option, but the Chiefs getting this Chris Jones deal done allows them to think like this now. You can move on from that, forget about it, you know he's there. You gave him the money he deserves, keep him happy to produce, and you can move on to improving this team to make that three-peat dream statement more so of a reality. I think a lot of teams will be favored over the Chiefs. I think a lot of NFC teams will be, but I don't think it'll be a surprise to anybody if the Chiefs are competing in the conference championship against, the Bengals, the Texans, the Ravens, any of those teams. No one's going to be surprised, and if they make it back to the Super Bowl, I think everyone would be silly to bet against the Kansas City Chiefs or Patrick Mahomes. But that's a long, long time away. Congratulations to the Chiefs for getting this deal done and for continuing to set a standard for all these other teams in the NFL. They're at the top for a reason, and that's a big reason why. They get all their stuff done and just keep chugging along, keep this machine going down the line. Probably more success down the line. But in the meantime, while they're planning that out, I'm going to move on with the show. I'm going to send it to another break here. But on the other side of this break and in the other half of the show, I'm going to talk about all the free agent deals that I didn't talk about yesterday. Yesterday was more so the quarterbacks and the biggest deals I think that happened. Now, there are other big deals that happened that I'm going to talk about now and recap them, as well as discussing the Vikings situation. Are they better or are they worse now after the first couple of days? So stick around. You're not going to miss that. You're not going to want to miss that on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Don't go anywhere.